Today, we are taking a journey back to the Wild West, a time of lawlessness, gold rushes, and yes, brothels. But not just any brothels. We are talking about the filthiest brothels of the Wild West. Part 1. The Rise of Brothels in the Wild West. As we set our sights on the mid-19th century, we find ourselves in the midst of a great migration. The discovery of gold in California in 1848 sparked a frenzy, with an estimated 300,000 people uprooting their lives in the hopes of striking it rich. This period, known as the Gold Rush, was a defining moment in American history, shaping the socio-economic landscape of the country. The vast majority of these fortune seekers were men, leaving behind their families and venturing into the unknown. They arrived in makeshift mining towns, places that sprung up overnight and were often as lawless as they were dusty. These towns were rough and tumble, filled with hard-working, hard-drinking men who spent their days toiling in the mines and their nights seeking entertainment and companionship. In these male-dominated environments, demand for certain services quickly became apparent. Enter the brothels. These establishments, offering everything from a drink and a game of cards to the company of a woman, began to spring up in the mining towns across the West. They were often the first structures built, sometimes even before the town's general store or blacksmith. But who were the women who worked in these brothels? Many were widows or daughters of miners. Some were immigrants, lured by the promise of easy money. Others were simply women who had fallen on hard times. Regardless of their background, these women were drawn to the brothels as a means of survival in a world that offered them few other opportunities. The rise of brothels in the Wild West was a direct response to the social and economic conditions of the time. They were a product of the gold rush, the mass migration, and the gender imbalance that characterized this era. In the next part, we'll delve into the conditions within these brothels, a far cry from the glitz and glam often portrayed in Hollywood westerns. Part 2. The conditions. To say the conditions in these brothels were subpar would be an understatement. Overcrowding was a common issue. Rooms were often small, poorly ventilated, and lacked privacy. In many cases, several women would share a single room, with beds that were rarely more than a thin mattress on a wooden plank. Sanitation was another major concern. With no indoor plumbing, waste disposal was a constant challenge, leading to unsanitary conditions that were ripe for the spread of disease. Diseases such as syphilis and tuberculosis were rampant, and with little understanding of germ theory or access to medical care, many women suffered from chronic illnesses. Despite the harsh conditions, the brothels offered a means of survival for many women. In a time and place where opportunities for women were severely limited, working in a brothel, despite its many hardships, offered a degree of financial independence. It was a hard life, but for many, it was the only life available to them. The women who worked hard in these brothels were from a mixed background and circumstances. Some were widows or deserted wives with no other means of support. Others were immigrants, lured by false promises of respectable work, only to find themselves trapped in a life of prostitution. And some were simply women who had fallen on hard times and saw no other way to survive. Despite the hardships, there was a sense of camaraderie among the women. They shared their lives, their hopes, and their dreams with each other. They laughed, they cried, and they supported each other through the trials and tribulations of life in the brothels of the Wild West. In the next part, we'll explore some of the most notorious brothels and madams of the time who managed to carve out a name for themselves amidst the filth and squalor. Part 3. Notable brothels and madams. As we delve deeper into the world of Wild West brothels, there are some establishments and figures that stand out from the rest. Among them, the infamous Birdcage Theater in Tombstone, Arizona, holds a special place. This wasn't just a brothel, it was a saloon, a gambling hall, and a theater all rolled into one. Open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it was known for its all-night entertainment, and was often referred to as the wildest, wickedest night spot between Basin Street and Barbary Coast. Inside the Birdcage Theater, the birdcages, or cribs, were small rooms where the ladies of the night would entertain their clients. These rooms were suspended from the ceiling, giving the establishment its unique name. Despite its reputation, the Birdcage Theater attracted some of the most famous personalities of the time, including Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Moving eastward to Lexington, Kentucky, we encounter Madame Belle Brezing. Belle was a woman of ambition and business acumen who transformed her humble beginnings into a prosperous career as a madame. Her brothel, known simply as Belle Brezing's, was renowned for its luxury and the high social status of its clientele. Belle's business model was so successful that it was said to have inspired the character of Belle Watling in Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind. Nestled amidst the vibrant streets of Dodge City, Kansas, Madame Dora Dufresne reigned over her legendary establishment, affectionately dubbed Dora's Delight. Radiating an irresistible charm and wit, Dora bewitched cowboys and gamblers alike, fashioning a sanctuary of indulgence and respite from the untamed frontiers of the Wild West. Her allure was undeniable, drawing patrons from far and wide to partake in the pleasures of her illustrious establishment, forever etching her name into the annals of Wild West lore. Despite the harsh and often dangerous conditions of brothel life, figures like those who ran the Birdcage Theater and Madame Belle Brezing managed to carve out a name for themselves. They navigated the complexities of the Wild West, creating establishments that were not only profitable, but also an integral part of the social fabric of the time. Part 4. The role of brothels in society. Despite their reputation, brothels played a significant role in the society of the Wild West. They provided a source of income for many women who had few other opportunities for employment. In a world dominated by men, these establishments offered a level of financial independence. Moreover, brothels contributed to the local economy. The money that flowed into these establishments didn't just stay there. It was used to buy goods and services from local businesses, helping to stimulate economic growth in these burgeoning frontier towns. Beyond the economic impact, brothels also served a social function. They were places where men, far from home and the civilizing influence of traditional society, could find companionship and a temporary escape from the harsh and often lonely realities of life on the frontier. They were places of laughter and music, where stories were shared, and where the whiskey often flowed freely. Part 5. The Decline and Legacy. By the early 20th century, the era of the Wild West was coming to an end. The gold had been mined, the land had been settled, and the law was becoming ever more present. As more and more women made their way west, the gender imbalance that had given rise to brothels began to level out. At the same time, societal attitudes were changing. Reform movements, often led by women, started to challenge the legality and morality of brothels. These establishments, once tolerated as a necessary evil, were increasingly seen as a blight on the moral landscape. Yet, despite their decline, the brothels of the Wild West have left a lasting legacy. They are a testament to the hardships and the resilience of the women who worked in them. They are a reminder of the wild and untamed time in American history. Today, many of these old brothels have been preserved as museums, standing as monuments to a bygone era. So there you have it, the untold story of the filthiest brothels of the Wild West. They were places of hardship and survival, of sin and entertainment, and they played a crucial role in the shaping of the American West. Join us next time as we continue to explore the fascinating stories of history.